Hey everyone, it's Ophi back for another round of Starstruck with Vanessa Montgomery from Astro
Hey.
All Stars. Hey, she's in Australia. Here it is, the end of 2019. I'm freezing here in New York, and my Sag sister down under is sitting there in the sun with what was that flower?
Frangipani's flower
Frangipani
power.
season, apparently. Well, it's Frappuccino season here because it's pretty cold. So, no, that's awesome. Much bad, sad humor. But welcome, Vanessa. And
Hey.
Vanessa is the author of Star Power, an awesome, adorable book that I see everywhere here in the States. It's at all our Urban Outfitters and cute gift shops. And yeah, we're going to be talking what two Sag women would be expected to talk about: the role of activism, specifically feminism, and the women's movement, and how we think that might be evolving into the 2020s. So, you know, what had you be interested in that besides being a Sag with an Aries moon? Maybe that was really just the impetus.
I think it's the Aries moon is really feeling the vibe. But I've always had this strong feeling of feminism and, really been very aware of, when I'm being limited because of my gender, told I'm going to get married and have children. I'm 4 years old. Like, no, I have other plans. I'm going to travel. I'm going to study Sagittarian plans. And
Hashtag.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's always been my dream. So I'm just really noticing now how opportunity is knocking, and there's this real wave of, they call it third wave of feminism, second being in the 70s, 60s, 70s. And now it's really risen up. And I'm looking at the astrology and, as a reason why, like, or what does the astrology say about it? It's definitely not going away. And the other thing I was thinking, what's changed? Why now? And I think it's clearly because we have access to information. Everyone has access to information, and there's more voices, women's voices. So once someone starts talking about something, other people see it, and these people wouldn't have had a voice before. So, I feel the vibe, and it can roll and grow as well because there's no one to moderate it and shush it down.
So why do you think astrology and feminism are kind of mashing up a lot on social media? Social justice activism, it's become a thing within the astrology
Mm.
community, or parts of it, especially online. Do you have any theories on that?
Yeah. Well, it does seem to be mostly women into astrology and on socials as well. It's mostly women. So it's like we finally have this global forum, actually, which is unprecedented. That's never happened ever before in history. So
Go ahead, sorry.
it's like it's revealing the truth of things, and it's revealing a potential that can happen, and that potential's happening. And then on the side of that is we all have access to making money in a different way. So we're getting more independence and more financial power, more personal power. And, that's the game changer, I think. So
I think historically, too, in the stars, here we are wrapping up the 2010s decade, where Uranus, which is about technology and revolution and innovation, was in Aries, which is the sign of the self, encouraging that outspokenness, anger to be voiced, just people to speak
yes.
up for individual and personal rights. So here we are wrapping up a decade where it was, predominantly that. And I think that caused it to explode through technology and social media as well. Now we're
Yes.
moving into a decade that'll be Uranus in Taurus half, and Uranus in Gemini, which is all the new ideas and communications. So we'll talk about how that might spark more. One of the
Yes.
things that I've learned in my research, some of my background is in women's publishing, and I also worked for Gloria Steinem and Ms. Magazine for about a year at the turn of the century. And so I had a little peek behind the curtain of the second to third wave feminist shift. But one of the things that I love from history is that there were these cookbooks that the suffragists used to share, these women's suffragist cookbooks, and they would hide these little revolutionary recipes in the cookbooks because it was where men would never think to look. It was hiding in plain sight. So Tali and I have this theory that astrology is like the new suffragist cookbook. It's a thing that maybe, you know, not all men, because men are really coming around to astrology, but for a long time it's been mocked and treated as fluff or, you know, women's magazine filler fodder, you know, birdcage liner. But we've been tucking these revolutionary messages into horoscopes, you know, or we can, and they're hiding in plain sight, just like in these cookbooks. So I'm kind of I'm kind of loving that it's still ours for now. So
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, I didn't know that. And yeah, it's a good point. It is really enmeshed in. I think it's definitely, oh, the other thing I'm thinking of is, well, actually, I'll go back to the Uranus in Aries. You're right. That definitely, it really kicked things off in a big way. And now the Aries vibe is continuing through with Chiron in Aries for the next however many years, 8 years, 7 or 8 years. And then it will, you know, do a changeover again with Neptune into Aries. So that Aries vibe is going to continue right through next decade of 2020, this decade. And, yeah, and I think that's an imbalance as well, like that assertive sort of action principle, that right to be strong and powerful, it's just going to continue and open up. So Uranus in Aries, you know, women went to the gym and got strong, and strong, powerful women became fashionable, as well as selfies. But apart from that, no, that was a big turn, wasn't it, in the trend? And so I think with Chiron in Aries, you know, that's the wounded healer and the healing journey, that's going to continue bringing up even deeper wounding around that masculine principle, because there's no gender, there's no masculine or feminine, but it's been divided, of course. So I think that's a big thing. And then on the other side, yeah, we've got Uranus in Taurus, very feminine planet, you know, feminine, and all the Capricorns, so Pluto and Saturn and now Jupiter in Capricorn, which is ready for a rebrand, because that's a feminine planet. And we see it as, you know, and this annoys me no end, the little things, you know, always Saturn is he, and it's like an old man.
Yeah, let's talk about this genderizing the planets. I mean, we do it sometimes too, and I'm always like, oh no, how do we personify the planets, and do we call them they, them? You know, I don't know, you know.
Well, so that's the thing. I would love a new term, like people are using it, they and them, but I'd love just a new terms, like fresh. But when I was writing Star Power, this was a real point. Like I ended up just saying it. Sometimes I'll say she. I never really say he, because we're women reading this mostly. And that's been an annoyance to me through my whole life. Everything's he. I'm just not relating.
Yeah, it's really something to think about when you're writing horoscopes, like, because, you know, in mythology, Mars is a he, Saturn is a he. So, you know, a lot of astrologers want to stay true to the mythology. And then, you know, and then it's very generational.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing. And we're diverging a little bit more, I suppose, here, but it was rebranded to that. So before that, originally, you know, Babylonian, Minoans, Sumerian, that's where our astrology comes from. Ancient Egypt, they were feminine, you know, and all those gods, they were originally female deities, and the male sort of came up, like marriage kind of killed it all. That's when things changed. But the males came up, you know, they were sort of like an underling or a friend or whatever, or a cousin, and then they were married, and then, oh, they had the power. And the original goddess, if she was even written in anymore, was just kind of like over here. So yeah, it's true, the mythology that we use now, it's like it's so old and times have changed, and we need to rebrand that and bring back, you know, these can be female archetypes as well as male archetypes. And it's really hard to relate to, I think, you know, the Sun, Saturn, and Mars, particularly when it's all like male stuff. And I think we've got to really start to break that down somehow, because if we are going to see ourselves differently and step into this opportunity that's right on our doorstep right now, we need to start changing that. So I guess in terms of activism, which is what my talk is about, that's how I'm doing it personally. You know, activism can come in all different shapes and sizes, and it can be small steps. And I think at the end of the day, it's all those little decisions that you make and all those little steps that you take that create the bigger picture and the journey. So for me, when I'm writing anything to do with astrology and putting it out there, that's at the forefront of my mind. And I use language that's very, and I notice you guys do too, which I've always loved about you, very Sagittarian. It's very positive, very open, and
language, yeah.
yeah. And it's very empowering because it's positive. It's not the cat and the negative side of don't do this. It's like, well, this is your option. Like if you can know what you don't want, but if you don't give an option and create a potential and a future, and well, what then? Like being creative, you're still sort of stuck over here. So for me, that's my activism. It can be
it's not little, because we're writers and as astrologers, anyone who writes astrology, it's being read very widely now. You actually, again, it's that cookbook principle. It's like astrology is not going to change the world. Maybe it is. It's some of the most read, sticky content on the internet in an age of technology. Everybody's astrologizing everything. And so we actually can play our part in being deliberate about, you know, how we may incorporate modern gender fluid, non-binary language.
Yes.
Regardless of our own orientation, or, you know, just to sort of reflect the changing world with ours. You know, I feel like not everyone wants to do it. Some people are like, why can't it be the way it's always been? And then others are like, well, let's adapt this industry along with the times as they evolve and become inclusive, because ultimately astrology has always been loved. Well, not always maybe, but you know, the times that I've grown, it's always been loved for being a place where people feel understood and included rather than alienated. So is the world going to stop spinning if you know, astrology isn't as inclusive? You know, when you talk about it, it could sound silly, but you know, it is a haven for a lot of people. It's where, you know, I was publishing our multicultural women's magazine, Hues, when I discovered astrology and fell in love with it in the mid 90s. And it was a huge watershed moment. And I don't think it was a coincidence that it overlapped, because here we were writing about themes of diversity and identity politics, and yet we found astrology as a language that could go beyond that. Even like we're dealing with all the, you know, the things that we're dealing with individually based on our cultural and gender and other identities, but astrology was like this, okay, it's like this explains parts of me that nothing about what I was born into, you know, race or religion or culture wise does. So
yeah, so much so I think, you know, because you know, how we think and language really forms our world, like it's a framework. So astrology, we are using it as a framework more than ever to understand things. It's an outlook, and how do I even get a handle on something? So I think us kind of putting that out there and changing it is developing that handle, really, which is why it's so up for a rebrand. And to remember, those myths were rebranded, like extremely, like they were turned right around. So now perhaps we've done both polarities, and it's time to, well, Neptune's in Pisces, which is all about that fluidity and bringing everything into union. Like, why not go to that third place where we can just be people,
Yeah.
regardless of the gender. You know, just I think that we have that behind us in terms of opening it all up with some sort of rebrand, for
I mean, I
sure.
love it. It's happening.
It
And
is.
you mentioned a rebrand. I love that word, of Capricorn, because Capricorn is the preeminent energy of 2020. If you've watched any of
It
the
really is.
Starstruck videos, um, yet it's all about the Capricorn. And Capricorn, as you pointed out, is a feminine planet, but it's also the daddy, the patriarchy, the male, the so it's almost this paradoxical. It is very gender fluid in
Mm.
many ways because it goes back and forth between being a feminine yin planet and
Hmm.
dad. So
So that's confusing, isn't it, when you think about it? And it's true. It is a feminine planet. It's an earth. All the earth signs are feminine, ruled by Saturn, which then we would think that, well, where's the feminine and matriarch in that? Because we see Saturn as an old white guy with lots of power, you know, and it's
that's how
not,
he's been branded. He needs a rebrand, like you
he
said,
needs a rebrand.
or they need a
It
rebrand,
needs a
right?
rebrand.
Let's practice what we're
Absolutely.
preaching. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it's like, so where for women is that Saturnian vibe? Like, where is that Capricorn vibe? How do we get in touch with that if we see it as a masculine principle? And it's true, it does seem to represent, you know, the larger corporations and certainly the government and government power. But I think that's because it's all been like, I don't know, it's been pushed into this corner. So, if anything, looking back in history, and especially with Capricorn, because it's a sign that really rules history and tradition. So, I had a little look back. And again, originally, it was the women that were the architects of society, which is, you know, Capricorn is the architect of society, really. And there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of power to be like Pluto's in Capricorn. So that's like, it's a volcanic, it's like breaking everything down and sort of spewing the guts out of again. So I think that's our opportunity now to, we have to realize and identify that we have access to this Capricorn energies and not just to sort of give it away, because energy has to go somewhere, right? So if you don't embrace it, someone else will. So Pluto's power, Saturn is, you know, it's also control. They're both sort of similar in that way, and they're meeting up next year. There's a lot of planets in Capricorn. So really think about
Watching this. Yeah.
it
Yes.
is Capricorn year,
Yeah.
a decade really. So yeah, like it's the little things that you do. Again, where are you taking, you know, keywords for Pluto and Saturn? Where are you taking responsibility in your life? Where are you taking control? How are you managing your power, your personal power, which is very much Pluto, and responsibility for your life, you know, and not being too like bang, bang, bang against something. Just take it here and don't worry about that. Just create. That, I guess, is
that's the challenge, because I think, you know, with Uranus and Aries for most of the 2010s, it was anger towards something that was necessary. You know,
yes.
Uranus and Aries began with the Arab Spring. You know, it was like people who felt oppressed, silent,
Yes.
not free, speaking out against that. And Pluto and Capricorn, the cycle going from 2008 to 2024, about shaking up systems, institutions, governments, patriarchy, all of that. It's given rise to this real, you know, boom of feminism, being like, you know, like I've never seen this, you know, feminism go mainstream. You know,
Absolutely.
it went mainstream with the Me Too movement began. And there's a lot of kind of stuff, gunk that's been buried coming up. And with Pluto meeting up with Saturn January 2020, you know, we're going to see where this is all leading. But you mentioned something before we started chatting on camera. So the last time Saturn and Pluto met in Capricorn to shake up the patriarchy or maybe expose some of it was 1518. And you mentioned the witch hunts. So yeah.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, just looking back in history, I thought that was an interesting thing. You know, we've got the rise of the feminine and a lot of things that have been repressed that are associated with that, which, you know, a big one is obviously the whole witchy sort of rebrand and vibe.
Yes,
And
witches and feminists have all come back.
yeah, and I think
Some
that's,
overlapping, yeah.
and I think it's just a
Proudly,
lot of it's
yeah.
a lot of it's the face of that. It's just a different way of going about things. Same with the whole manifesting principle. It's not just this like, you know, you work, you do this. Like, actually, there's magic in the world as well, and there's different ways of doing things. Literally manifesting, and yeah, the witch thing, which is like a respect, which is just a human thing, a respect for nature and cycles, and, you know, a different sort of level of creation. You know, it's all equal both ways. So I thought, you know, that's having such a huge revival. Who's ever seen anything like this before? Also mainstream, with feminism mainstream, along with, you know, smash the patriarchy, which is quite extreme as well, very Pluto. But
Yeah.
yeah, so the Reformation
Going on.
started basically when Pluto went into Capricorn in, yeah, what was it, 1516. And then Martin Luther, I've got my notes here, Martin Luther
Yep.
started basically a political and religious revolution
That was
when
October
he,
1517
yeah,
that right before
in,
January 1518, the exact Pluto Saturn meetup.
isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Nailed a petition of 95 complaints to a church door. And the thing was, at the time, that pushed him over the edge was there was excess. So Capricorn follows on from Sagittarius, of course, and
Yep.
I'm pretty open to living a high vibe life of excess, you know, my whole,
Yeah.
you know,
I've done
I
that once
wish.
or twice. Yeah.
But things are a cycle. And I have noticed, looking back in history, you know, there's all the big bubbles that we have. Usually there's something in Sagittarius. The recessions we have, usually when we go into, or a major planet goes into Capricorn, like most times that's the case. So the GFC, of course, bubble, just before that, we were having a big Jupiter bubble when
Yeah.
Pluto was in Sagittarius, and then it went into Capricorn. And as many astrologers were predicting, there was a massive crash. So back in earlyish 1500s, the same thing, like the church was the power. They were having there was literally, what was this guy's name? Pope Leo, living large like a Leo. He would have 65 course banquets. They were just using up all the money, having a massive, awesome party, obviously through the Pluto and Sagittarian years. And people were just having enough. And so Martin Luther nailed his complaints to a door, and it basically started a revolution where the church split. And so with this splitting of power, the churches had to vie for followers, basically, because that's where they got their money, because the constituents, of course, would pay the church. So the churches had to prove, like, or basically compete with each other to gain the followers. So they'd exercise power and show that, you know, we're looking after you, we can deal with evil. And so they basically came up with this spin on witches and, you know, women being evil, and we can hunt them out, we can protect you from these evil women. And so they basically made all this hype so that they fostered fear in people, and then they could come in and solve the problem.
Yeah.
Which, of course, we see politicians use all the time now.
Yeah, the witch hunt term, I was thinking that too. It's like that has become, but male politicians have been using the term witch hunt during this Pluto and Capricorn, which is really interesting because two churches were using witch hunts to compete for, you know, almost like an advertising and marketing campaign.
Absolutely.
Catholic, Protestant, who killed the most witches? Not to make light of it, you know, I mean,
who's got your back? And it's that polarity of the us and them, which is used all the time. So again, coming back to the Neptune with in Pisces, you know, finding that union and that place of we're all one and we're all similar is a much safer zone to be in. And when you think like that, you can't be manipulated as easily.
People
But yeah,
are
so
feeling that there's a witch hunt vibe in the air with Pluto and Capricorn. That is an experience that a lot of people may be having at times.
mm,
What it says to me is the need for a rebrand for Capricorn too, from
oh, desperately.
like this moralistic right wrong. It's almost become this like, you're witch hunting me, no, you're witch hunting me, and it's
Yeah, don't buy
a bit of
into it.
drama going on here.
Absolutely, the drama. So don't, what's the answers? Don't buy into it. Yeah, what's a rebrand on Capricorn is that Capricorn originally, yeah, was matrilineal, it was the matriarch. It was like, we just take care of all of you, we build society, we take control, responsibility for ourselves and for society and others. And I do think, like, I keep coming back to that Neptune in Pisces, because I think that's really going to help usher in, a bit more. And that's definitely part of the picture here.
Well, let's
But
play a
yeah,
game as Sages. Let's rebrand the planets. We're all walking
I
ad agencies. Let's try it. How could
well,
we rebrand Saturn and Capricorn? I'm thinking maybe the provider.
yeah, well, let's rebrand. So let's look for living examples right now. And so I'll go to, I think Capricorn is, it's female administrative power. It is power, it is government, it is, people in places that can affect change and make structures and systems that work for society. That's the point of Capricorn. So I can't help think of, like, there's so many women now in government. There's so many women now, heads of countries.
The head of the
And
IMF,
they're young.
Christine Lagarde. She is a Capricorn. I mean, there's a lot of powerful Capricorn women right now who are literally embodying this. So
They are. And there's heaps. And there's a lot that I think, is it Finland?
right, yeah.
Alexandria
She a Capricorn?
Ocasio, not Capricorn, but she's an example of
Capricorn. AOC. She's a Libra, but she was born when Saturn was in Capricorn.
Oh, that's interesting. So
Saturn
she's having her return.
Yeah.
And she's young.
She is.
And the Finnish president, prime minister too, young. Her whole cabinet's young. They're all women. Well, a lot of women. They're like, early 30s.
I know. I haven't looked at, which is interesting, because Capricorn and Saturn rule age and time and wisdom. So we're seeing this
the youth
challenge, the Saturn Pluto conjunction. We're seeing a redefining of almost what age and wisdom mean too, a shake up to that, a challenge to that. There's a lot of people who are born during a time when there was a stellium, Uranus, Pluto, sorry, not Uranus, Pluto, Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune, in Capricorn.
Yeah, right.
Late 80s, early 90s, a very unique period when there was this cluster of Capricorn planets, and they are showing up almost as these very serious, like early 30s, late 20s, like, we're here to run stuff. So looking at the era when you were born and what was happening then, everyone comes in with their assignment at their time that they were born. So there's
that's a good point.
Who has a right to take a seat of power is something that we're going to be looking at, I think, into the 2020s, because of this Capricorn remix that's going on. So you just had me thinking that. But even like to rebrand beyond female male, just like what is the energy of Capricorn, of Saturn or Capricorn, that we can all tap into, no matter how we identify or how we were born biologically. So is it an energy of providing, of accountability, of leadership? I mean, the world needs more of all of that. Resourcefulness. Those are the words that are coming to my mind. Just being discerning.
And responsibility for yourself, and seeing how we are, it's definitely a group vibe, Capricorn, isn't it? Like Aries is like me fighting. Capricorn's like, the provider. How can I look after myself and you too? How can we find a place of strength and power that will be enduring and, you know, do things that build for the future? It's very, you know, it's an earth sign. They build for the future. How can we implement structures, structures and systems is a big one for Capricorn. And there's no gender to people that can make structures and systems. It's just, we're all in this together,
right?
You know.
Yeah, let's make ones that work. What about Pluto? Because Pluto could use a rebrand, just like just like the sign that rules Scorpio, but we're not going to touch that now. You had your turn, Scorpio, a couple years ago. But Pluto could use a rebrand because it's the god of the underworld and the Lord, you know, karmic avenger kind of, which is not very empowering. So, you know, think of Pluto as the mirror, the worker, almost a healer through the shadows. Like Pluto really gets in there, like a shaman in a way. I don't know if everybody would agree in conferring Pluto with shamanic credit, but you know.
I go in with the shaman and Chiron, but yeah, in certain ways, yeah, because it's so, you've just got to get in and expunge with the Pluto. Maybe Pluto in Capricorn. How do we rebrand that? I think it's not being afraid of your power. It's so much power. And in terms of this whole sort of thing that's happening with world power, you know, not to be afraid of that feeling, you know, you've just got to face it or it will be done to you. Like I think with the planets and the energies, you work them or they will work you through someone else. So I think that a lot of us are, you know, afraid of that real power. Like there's that quote, when women wake, mountains move, like, or mountains tremble, and it's true. Like there's more women born than men. If we're going to go into gender, there's more women in the world. There just is. So that's more than half the population. If each woman just sort of steps up into that power, the world changes in a blink of an eye. But it's, you know, it's all our own solo individual journeys to get in touch with that feeling that you want to push away a lot of the time. You know, as a Sagittarius, I'm pretty, in some ways, driven, but also light and fluffy. I don't have that Scorpio vibe that can just go into things. You know, I've relied on friends that are heavily Scorpio just to kind of hold my hand.
Plenty for both of us.
So. Yeah, share it around. And yeah, the Sag combo for you guys helps promote and share that, which is amazing. I've had to outsource, but yeah, I think
that's what we have to do. Yeah,
it's powerful. It's a powerful woman. It's a powerful man. It's a powerful person. It's a powerful wherever you are on the spectrum. It's just not fearing. I think with the Saturn and the Pluto, there can be a lot of fear because they are powerful, and I think we've been taught to give that away because then we're easily manipulated, and that's the other side of Pluto, is that manipulation. So yeah, you've got to own it or it will own you. How would you rebrand Pluto?
I like everything you said. I think ownership of everything. Pluto and Capricorn, I think, like getting ourselves out of the blaming and the echo chambering and just really like going
the shaming.
Like we have, you know, one of the Starstruck episodes is about shame and transforming it. And I've actually had really interesting conversations with some of the male astrologers that have come on the show, and to talk about, like, you know, what is the role of men now? Like, is it a little bit of it's an identity crisis time for men. I think Pluto and Capricorn is embracing the identity crisis of gender because it's in a transitional period, you know, not necessarily a gender transition the way we think of it, but we're all in a gender transition of sorts, you know, and we're all having some sort of gender reassignment, celestial surgery in a way, because, you know, what it's not what it was, and but people are still adjusting to what role to play, what role feels like the right role for you naturally. How do you even
Yeah.
know things are still being imposed on you? How do you get them off of you, or how do you embrace the ones? And I think we're in a we've had more questions than we have had answers. And I think in the new decade,
Mm.
that's gonna continue, but we have a lot more, like you said at the very beginning, information. We have more
Yes.
information than ever. So we're gonna be able to meet those questions of the 2020
Mm.
with a database of information and references from the last 20 years of being in the millennium, and all of the things that third wave feminism and all the different activist movements and how they've evolved have given us. So that's now going to blend with these spiritual modalities that have grown and exploded in the 2010s as well. So
That's interesting. Like I just speaking, like my feeling is it's like, you know, in that chrysalis stage, you know, everything's kind of mashing in, and that's the opportunity, that's the creative space. And Capricorn is going to push for crystallization. So I think,
yes.
yeah, we're getting mashed now, which I think is exciting. I've lived for this day forever. I really want those things to break open for women and men, because no one wins in a polarity. Like no one wins. You can be anything. It doesn't matter your hair color or your gender or your ethnicity. You know, we're all human, and we have all, that's the thing with the astrology. We have all these archetypes. We have all the planets, all the signs in our chart, and it does, charts don't have a gender.
Right.
Or
It's a nice
nothing.
reprieve from, like all of the facets of your identity in the world. Well, they matter because it's like we live in a world where we can't ignore them. They're forced to matter. And then they matter because they're part of who you are. But astrology is such a great break from some of the heaviness or burden of that can come with that, where you have the archetypes to play inside of, like you just said. It's more fun, to play
It
with your
is.
identity. It's
And I
different
think
language,
it's
but
creative, isn't it? Like you can sort of get a bit of detachment and step aside. When I use it in with counseling, it's just, you know, my clients will say it's just really helped them to step aside, and you know, you're not going to take things as personally, you're not going to resist as hard. You just get this space to sort of start playing with ideas and start to open them up and start to apply that. Well, what if we did this? What would that look like? What would that feel like? And
right.
that is a great way to use astrology and the archetypes and the signs and the planets and start to literally rebrand. And then you get to see that and think, oh, well, what resonates? Oh, I like that idea. I could take a bit of that on. And yeah, you're right. Identity, it is important, but it's also extremely flexible, and you are the creator. You can do whatever you
That's
like with it,
different than
and you can change it.
That's different than like, this is what I was born as, so I have to take a stand. And
Yeah.
versus like, okay, this is my chart and there's this room to interpret it, and these
A
different
lot of
assets of my identity. Maybe I want to turn up the volume on one or turn down the volume on another.
yes.
Like the word you use that really stood out to me was creative.
Yes.
Like to be able to create who we are instead of being told who we are. But I mean, listen, we're two Sagittarians. This is what we live for everyone to have, to champion for the world.
Absolutely.
You having the freedom to say who you are to the world, and be that, and have that be seen and embraced versus rejected and silenced and shut down. Like, if you want to give me a soapbox, that's the one I'm getting on. I bet you are too. Yeah, well, need two of them, please. So
it's true. Yeah, it's championing whatever you want. It's the freedom. We're mutable signs. Like we understand you can adapt, and you can, you know, Sagittarius is about expansion. Like you can expand yourself. You didn't stop when you were born. You didn't stop at 2 or 10 or 20, I hope. You know, and here's coming back to Capricorn. It's about that journey of growth to wisdom over time. You don't just stop. You keep sort of building and adding to yourself and what you're doing and your idea of self and your world. That also benefits other people. And that's where the Capricorn, as you know, the third earth sign, it's transpersonal, it's concerned with the wider society and realizing your impact on the wider society and all those choices you make. And especially because we can make them public now, we put them out there, and then other people can see a new way modeled, and they might take a little thing from that. But you living authentically, which is
That's
such a big
big
Capricorn word,
buzzword. Yeah.
massive, authentically, just sets the pace for other people. And I think that's one of the main benefits of actually the internet at the moment, is that all these different extremely diverse voices, there's more diversity growing because of it, and you're leading the way by example.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. Well, wow, this is a lot of awesome stuff to think about for the 2020s. And just, sure, we're getting sag philosophical here, but, it all matters. It's all, like you said, little bits, little things you can do. They add up to that snowball.
They
If you
do.
look at a decade, look back at where we were in 2010 and where we are now. All the small things, that have gotten us to this big picture now. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we do with all the knowledge and information that we've shared between us, the influence of Saturn and Jupiter and Sagittarius for part of the 2010s that made us a global society. And, for better or worse, you can get a green juice in almost any major city in the world now, or, a vegan meal or whatever. That was not happening 10 years ago. Get Wi-Fi almost anywhere in the world, or call someone on WhatsApp from almost anywhere in the world. Like, I ordered a pizza in Tulum and had it brought to the resort on WhatsApp. I don't know if that's a good thing. We won't even touch that one, but I did do it, one night, and that wasn't even happening a couple of years before. So how will we work with this energy responsibly, resourcefully, and to connect more? It's a conversation I'm glad we started today having, and I hope that everyone watching will think about and continue and add their ideas too. So where can people find you, Vanessa, or what projects are you looking forward to the most for this new decade?
Well, I'm really taking on board that, that Capricorn vibe of, it's really about making tangible things, thinking of, how can you help create tangibly for society? What's your impact on society? And being very responsible with that in a Sagittarian way. And I really feel the vibe for just continuing to write more books, and how I can do that to benefit whoever reads them. It's coming from that place, which is where my first book came from as well, actually. Certainly to service astrology, but built into that is, how can I help reform and rebrand the way we think of ourselves, and open up our views about ourselves and others. So that's the main thing. I'm really open to new things coming in. I feel like next year will be quite interesting. So just openness to manifesting for the higher good. Also, you can find me at my website and on socials, Astro All Stars with a Z, STARZ.com.
Yeah, awesome. Well, so glad we had this chat, and we'll be back for another episode later. I'm sure we'll be doing more talks in the new year, across the time zones, evening here, morning there.
I know it's so early.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much. And good luck everyone with the new decade. I think it's really exciting. I just say go for it.
Go for it.
Go for it. It's a new decade.
New year. Bye.